Welcome in this new podcast episode. Today I'm talking again with Melanie Rieback. Welcome back, Melanie.
Hello.
Um, we have been talking over 4 years ago in the podcast, but we had a lot of contact in between. We spoke, we even talk often on WhatsApp. Um, so if you want to learn more about, the background a bit, how it was 4 years ago, I think it's good to listen to the episode there. I will have a link in the show notes. And the idea today is to catch up, and because you did some really interesting stuff in the meantime, and how do you got to this, and what happened, and what is changing in this environment. So I think the most interesting part for me at the moment, and you may um, talk about it even broader than I see it, is the amount of time that you spend in attention to the post-growth entrepreneurship um, trainer program, the incubator program, the teaching that you do. I was part of the trainer program, and that's why I know a bit about it. But give us a bit of a background idea of what happened in the last couple of years on this topic for you.
Oh gosh, where do I start? So indeed, I have a increased focus, I would say, at the moment on post-growth entrepreneurship, more so than I did have 4 years ago. But that's just because this is taking on such a life of its own. It's completely crazy, actually. The incubator wise, we are into our fifth cohort. So, of course, you were part of last year's Train the Trainer. That was part of the fourth cohort that we had. And in the first four cohorts, we had roughly 12 to 15 founders per cohort. And that was a total of almost 60 incubated startups. Additionally, we had the Train the Trainers last year, which I think also had roughly 50-ish people. So that wasn't specifically for founders, but it was actually just more for people in the ecosystem who wanted to learn about post-growth entrepreneurship. And this year, when we advertised the fifth cohort, we had a little bit of a problem. And that was that we had 100 applications. And it was good applications too. So, at which point that kind of launched us into a mini crisis of like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do? We can't turn away 80% of the people. That would be completely ridiculous. But we also can't admit everybody either, and after quite a bit of deliberation, we decided that we would attempt to see if we could start horizontally scaling the program in such a way that we can enable folks, to be able to create their own PG incubators. Of course, there's a bit of a process really in getting from here to there. So in the end, I basically just figured, well, we'll use this year's cohort as guinea pigs. So I basically just admitted, pretty almost everybody. So we basically wound up with a group of 80 people in the WhatsApp. I would say about 50 of those people started out being pretty active. And I think we're probably going to get a group of like, I would say probably somewhere between 20 and 30, I think that'll participate actively until the demo day. So, and I'm sort of seeing ways in which we can try and structure the program in different groups to try and handle that. Right now, I would say I'm not handling it extremely well. I'm just putting a lot of work and time and effort in. But the whole plan, though, for this year is to create a playbook. For the PGE incubator, so we can actually enable other people to be able to teach those incubators. And since then, I've gotten other groups who are interested in self organizing. And that I think is our big project for this year to actually enable them to be able to put on these incubators without me. So at least that's the dream. So that is currently running. We're now, I think, in week 5 out of 8. The demo day will be the week before Christmas. I procrastinated a bit with starting the program this year, so that's what happens. We also have the post-growth entrepreneurship class at the University of Amsterdam Business School. That's definitely also something that happened in the last 4 years. We are in January running our program for the third time at the University of Amsterdam Business School. It is an official class. It's worth 6 European credit points, and we're teaching it for the third time to 120 third-year bachelor students. So it's part of the economics and sustainability minor, and it is oversubscribed. um, so not only do we have 120 students, but I actually just heard recently from the faculty, from the administration, that there's another 250 students on the waiting list, which is completely ridiculous. Like, who couldn't get in the class because it was full. So now we're having like discussions about whether or not we can scale the class, not this year, but maybe the year after. Ridiculous. So, but that's been good. I mean, it's really showing that there's a lot of resonance with students for this course. Additionally, since then, the course has also been taken on by a second business school, so the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And they enlisted my help to create a 2-course degrowth entrepreneurship module. And I'm going to be teaching it next year for the second time to their degrowth masters students. So that's the second business school now that is taking this on. And also this past year, I dedicated the year to doing something that I called the PGE Roadshow. And that's basically traveling to business schools, incubators, community groups, governments, different groups of people, basically promoting post-growth entrepreneurship and the class, and steward ownership also as a concept. And that has also been epic. And it's really also started leading to some amazing initiatives that are going on. Actually, this upcoming week, I'm going to Falkland in Scotland, in Fife, and they're going to be putting on a two-day PGE boot camp event, also talking about how they can seed PGE further in Scotland. So that's mega exciting. We've had, I was just contacted completely independently, like 2 weeks ago, by a group from Helsinki that also like self-organized PGE study group around the videos that I'd created and put online for the PGE class. And they sent me a really adorable photo of themselves in some fancy building, somewhere in Helsinki, and sent a whole list of like feedback on the videos and on their experience. And like, I don't know these people, and this happened like completely separately for me, but that's like perfect because that's exactly the direction it needs to go in. So I think that like for the upcoming year or two, what I really would love to do is just to be able to package all of this up in such a way that I can give it to people and say, this is how you do it. And this is how you do it without me.
Right.
So, and that's pretty good because of course I have been really busy with all of this. It has been quite tiring. I still have a cybersecurity company that's also going. Thank God the cybersecurity company is quite independently operating most of the time, but it also still occasionally requires my time and energy, obviously. So, um, but it's been good. All this PGE and nonprofit venture stuff is also good marketing for Radically Open Security. So the cybersecurity company has also continued growing. Right now, we're also at 50 people in the Radically Open. We've got a couple million in revenue. We finally hit our 10-year anniversary with the company, which is crazy. I flew everybody to Croatia for 1 week to have a big party to celebrate our anniversary. We just hit 1 million euros in donations to the NLnet Foundation, so that's another amazing milestone. So I can't complain. I mean, it's been busy, but it's been also just like it has completely exceeded my expectations for what this all could become, you know, and it's still going. So, you know, I have optimism. I think that it'll continue also in the upcoming years. And, you know, between that and also some of the other initiatives that I've been working on, it's just it's crazy how much progress I feel like we're also all collectively also making on this stuff.
Do you feel like more like a front woman for PGE now than a CEO of your own company?
Um, at the moment, I would say yes. I don't think that this is going to last forever. Because, as I said, I mean, my goal really is to try and package PGE up so I can start worming my way out of the middle of it. Because at a certain point, I would just like really think it would be awesome to just go back to pen testing again. You know, but until then, yeah, I mean, I'm not completely separated from the security stuff. I mean, I'm also still sometimes involved with engagements, and I also still give some talks and presentations and workshops and trainings, and you know, so I'm still involved in delivering that kind of material sometimes. But yeah, this year has been really exceptional with the PGE Roadshow. I don't usually spend this much time on it with presenting it, but yeah, I wanted to do this because it was really a sabbatical year for me. Because we hit the 10-year anniversary of Radically Open Security. I knew I wanted to take a sabbatical because 10 years is an awful lot of time to do anything. You know, but I thought about actually taking the year off, but then I thought, oh, that's really depressing. I don't want to stop working because I really love what I do. So I decided instead that I wanted to make the year a travel sabbatical, and that was sort of how I got the idea of the PGE Roadshow. And I placed a message on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, you know, I'm taking a year travel sabbatical. Would you be interested in having me come to your geographic location and to give a talk about PGE?" And in the end, I got 31 responses. So that basically kept me busy for the year. And even not everybody who invited me, I even like got to visit this year. I mean, there's even a few things that I just like didn't have time for. So it could be that there'll be some additional, you know, PGE Roadshow kinds of talks that will come next year, but I'm not planning on doing it at the same intensity. I can't. I don't want to, but I also need to get back to work. So I do feel like this has been a really God, it's been such a privilege. I mean, to be able to spend this year doing so much traveling, getting to meet so many people, learn so many things, you know, be able to evolve PGE as much as I have. It's been crazy. It's been a blessing. But at the same time, you know, I also feel like focus is also a good thing. And sometimes you actually just need time at home where you're not doing a whole lot. And I'm sort of, you know, this year was my travel sabbatical. I'm sort of hoping that next year can be a bit of a sabbatical from travel.
The um, the way I saw it, same thing happened to the PG trainer program. Also, that got so many applications. Um, so many people wanted to learn and also work with you to do the things because the way that you organized it was that you because there were so many people there that you figured, okay, to make this manageable, I don't want to give all the trainings and give people the space to give trainings on the topics they know more about. But then again, it costs a lot of time to organize that to make sure that people do give a training which is valuable to the group. You have, yeah, we had a couple of meetings to get my training right. So again, if to me it was like, my gosh, you put so many attention in what you do. I think it's really amazing how you build a community that way that people are in the end then also willing to help you with trainings that they could do for groups that they bring together, for example.
Yeah, but it's far bigger than me. I mean, you know, I mean, the PGE community is great, but it also has so much overlap with other communities. I mean, with Zebras Unite, with also the post-growth and the degrowth movement at large, which is getting larger, you know, by the day. Also, just people, anyways, that are into other social enterprise topics, anything green, sustainable, circular. I'm not saying they're all the same thing. They're not. But it's just the zeitgeist at the moment. I mean, also people in sustainable finance. I mean, again, it's not perfect, but, it's people that are really trying to do better. I mean, also even with you, Erno, with the inner development goals communities, bio leadership programs, and it's everywhere right now. So, donut economics. So I think that really, it's not anything that I'm cultivating, but it's more just that I'm tapping into something that I think anyway is kind of endemic in the moment. um, People realize that there's problems with how we're doing business and finance and entrepreneurship. And the better, I think we're finally starting to learn how to articulate this better. And I think also for the first time, we're starting to organize. Really understand the nature of the problem, also with an increased focus on governance structures, also for businesses. The steward ownership community also has been doing a really amazing work. And also in the last year, I've somewhat also hitched my wagon a bit to the steward ownership movement. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but I think, though, it's one of the best things out there. I think that it's one of the few movements that is really placing a lot of attention on asset locks and golden shares, which I think is a really important topic. I don't think foundation ownership is enough by itself. If you need evidence of that, look at OpenAI. But if sufficient golden shares and asset locks had been in place, then that mission drift of OpenAI wouldn't have happened. So, and I think also I see Purpose Foundation also in their community slowly evolving with their thoughts and also clarifying things. I think they're also doing great work in finance with Purpose Ventures. Um, and, I just all over the place, but also other leaders I can see in sustainable finance that are also trying to push the boundaries. I mean, you've also got Delilah Rothenberg with the pre-distribution initiative. You have Daniela Baroni Suarez and her snowball. I mean, you've got, gosh, I mean, Esme Verity and some of her activities. And yeah, I mean, there's just, I think, more and more of these kinds of initiatives that are popping up. And I'm not familiar with all the people and I'm not familiar with all the communities. And also some of them cost money and that keeps me out of it too. But at the same time, it's just, it's just really turning into a movement at this moment. And yeah, I mean, it's finally starting to break into the mainstream. It's also like
Mm.
when Patagonia made their business transformation. It was the very first time that I ever saw backlash from
Mm.
conservatives about steward ownership. And, I mean, it's both good and bad, right? I mean, that there's backlash, but at the same time, the fact that it was actually mainstream enough that it created backlash. I mean, that to me kind of shown, this is growing up. This is getting there.
Yet still, um, there's so much going on in politics right now. In the Netherlands, the US, many European countries, which are, don't have a very good outlook. So, do you feel like that we are close to a tipping point where, and you talk about how mainstream it's not getting, but it's closer, it's getting closer to that. Do you feel like we are at a tipping point that we are closer to that this is becoming for like 25% of people a good idea, that we degrowth, that we think about money that we keep in companies and we don't extract the profits so that the 99% is just getting bigger, but it's not getting bigger, but it's just getting the gap is just getting worse. Have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the gap is getting worse, and I think as much as the beyond growth community is growing in size, I don't think we're necessarily growing in power.
Mm.
We can do a lot through grassroots community, but I think at the moment there's a whole lot of political obstacles. And I think a lot of it is because of this shift towards the populist right that's been happening politically. almost everywhere at the moment. Um, I've experienced it myself also as a member of the Beyond Growth movement on a European level. So, Nonprofit Ventures was one of the co organizers of the really big event in May of 2023 when we took over Parliament. It was a huge party. And at the same time, as much as it was a party in May of 2023, we had a follow up event for organizers in December. And it was a bit depressing
Mm.
because here we were, in a room in the European Parliament talking about climate goals. And then basically a couple buildings over, the Econ Committee of the European Parliament was restarting austerity in Europe. And we just kind of realized that a lot of the political mandate that we had was slowly slipping away, with each election. And on top of that, Philippe Lambert, who is sort of the father of the European Beyond Growth movement in the Parliament. I mean, he was also retiring. It was unclear who was going to replace him, and there was just generally this feeling that. I brought a friend of mine who is an EU lobbyist to the session. And, at a certain point, we just like got up on the mic and asked, like, hey guys, just like, quick question here. How many people in this room are conservatives? Oh, nobody. Okay, that's what we thought. How about centrists? Is anyone here a centrist? Oh, okay, also not. Another question, like, what about business? How many CEOs do we have in here? I mean, like, don't tell me that I'm the only one, and I'm so warm and fuzzy anyway. I barely count, right? So, oh, okay, no business leaders in here either, right? We just had this panel on sustainable finance. We only had academics in the panel. Could we really not find a single finance professional who wanted to participate in this panel? This, guys, is our problem. And I really think that that is a large part of it because, I mean, given the political shifts, I mean, at this point, I think the progressive left needs to be extremely realistic about the fact that we cannot do this by ourselves. And it doesn't matter how much we push it, and it doesn't matter how much we want it, and it doesn't matter how angry we are and, how much we want systems changed and we're willing to protest for it. It's not going to get us there. Right. And on top of that, I think a lot of people are put off by our anger and they're put off by our continuous protesting and wanting to tear things down. Maybe people don't want to tear things down. Maybe people want to build things up instead. Maybe we need a more constructive story. Maybe we need to be building bridges with people rather than canceling them. But this is something that I think the left still needs to learn.
Yes.
So, and also, with me personally, with myself, I went through several experiences also over the last couple of years that also really convinced me of the necessity for political bridge building with
Mm.
those who might not always agree with us. So, one particular example is with the steward ownership entity form initiative that we started in the Netherlands. It's called the rentmeesterschap. Anyway, doesn't matter. But the point is that it all started in Germany. So the Purpose Foundation, and they put up a petition and they managed to collect 2,000 signatures. And this was actually enough to get a steward ownership entity form into the coalition accord of Olaf Scholz. Not to be outdone by the Germans, we kind of figured, well, if they can do it in Germany, we can do it in the Netherlands too. So we launched our own petition. And the way that it happened is we collected about 1,000 signatures from people. And
Mm.
then one of our center-left politicians, Jo Sneller from D66, he actually picked up the issue and he filed a motion in our Tweede Kamer, our second chamber of Parliament. And after that, the motion was co-sponsored by Femke Zeedijk, who is from the New Sociaal Contract party, basically one of our Christian right, center-right parties. After a month, it went up for vote in the parliament and it passed. And what was quite interesting was after the fact, I looked basically at who had voted what, on this motion. And it turns out that it got the straight progressive vote, it got the straight Christian vote, it also got the farmers. Yes, the same farmers who had driven their tractors, to The Hague to protest nitrogen. And who we didn't get were basically our neoliberal business party, the VVD, and basically our two extreme right parties, so PVV and FVD. So, but the funny part was, even without the farmers, just straight progressive plus straight Christian would have been enough to win the day. And this taught me an important lesson. So, another thing also is that sort of understanding that we don't always agree, as progressives with the Christians. There's a few hot button topics, like abortion, maybe like GLBTQ, maybe that are just best left avoided, because they might be things that we're never going to agree on. But it turns out, though, if you actually look at topics like economics and social business and social enterprise and well-being economy, actually, we are shockingly aligned. So, because surprise, I mean, it turns out that Christians actually care about economic inequality and they actually really care about, solving poverty and, and about treating your neighbor like yourself. I mean, all of these actually really are good Christian values. So if we focus on those parts where we agree with each other, it turns out that there's actually a whole lot of progress that can be made. And I learned this even more so by, first of all, I on the PGE Roadshow, I went to Scotland, and I went to a conference that was called Scotonomics that was in Dundee, and I had the great pleasure of meeting a economist whose name is Anne Pettifor. And she is this, heterodox economist who has been there, done that. She's probably in her 80s. And she's originally from South Africa. And she moved to the UK and she wrote several books on new economy. She started the New Economics Foundation, and she's also extremely well known for an initiative that was known around the turn of the century that was called Jubilee 2000. Those of us who are old enough, we might remember it. But for the young ones, so Jubilee 2000 was, so Anne Pettifor is reasonably progressive. And she said, I would really like debt relief for developing countries. Right? Because, I mean, who doesn't want that, right? But she did something surprising. She took that to the evangelicals. And she said, hey, guys, a debt jubilee is a biblical concept, right? And we haven't had one for, the last 49 years at least. So don't you think it's time that we have one? And what do you think about working together so we can try and make this happen? So the evangelicals thought about it and they were like, well, that's a pretty good idea, actually. Sure, we're in. So they started demonstrating together for debt relief, basically, for developing countries. At a certain point, they managed to get the Pope on board. And then after that, they managed to get the African churches on board. And then after that, they even managed to get musicians and celebrities like Bono and Youssou N'Dour, who started giving benefit concerts that were called Drop the Debt to fundraise for this whole effort. And then the whole thing cultivated with a giant human chain outside of the G8 summit when the G8 finally decided to relieve 100 billion in debt to 20 developing countries. Now, in retrospect, Anne Pettifor, looking back, when she first started the movement, she wanted to call the whole thing Drop the Debt. But the evangelicals overruled her. And they said, it's either Jubilee 2000 or we're out. And she said, in retrospect, looking back, the fact that the evangelicals overruled her was the most fortunate possible thing that could have happened, because if it had not been called Jubilee 2000, it wouldn't have happened.
The name drop that is so gives so much feeling to the people who want to sustain this world. Is that what you mean? That the name is made such a difference that by calling it Jubilee 2000, it's building a bridge.
Yes, because it was precisely because it was about that topic of a debt jubilee, which is a biblical concept that so many Christians were able to get behind it. And basically, really, the conclusion that I've come to is Christians plus progressives are pretty much unstoppable.
Mm, mm, mm,
And I think this actually, in a way, gives us a way forward because, we're entering a political era where I think it is extremely easy to feel depressed and it is extremely easy to feel helpless. But I think what's far better is if we can try and find strategies with which we can still make positive change happen. And I think this is actually one of those strategies because I've also discovered with the PGE Roadshow that there are groups of Christians in particular who are very attracted to the idea of taking financial extraction out of business and
mm,
finance.
mm,
Because it turns out that, financial extraction is a prohibition. It's prohibited in all three global Semitic languages. I mean, in Christianity, you have the concept of usury, right? I mean, you've got the whole parable of Jesus and the money changers and how he flips the tables in the temple district, because they're using money to breed more money, and then he throws them out. Yeah, also in Islam, I mean, you have the whole concept of Islamic banking and Sharia finance. I mean, not to say that it's always implemented entirely in pure ways, but at the same time, though, the actual religious principle is completely sound. Judaism also has its own versions of it. So that topic of usury, I think, is really a concept on which we're able to unite. And the problem is that I've discovered with post growth and particularly with degrowth is that these terms have become extremely politicized, particularly degrowth. So the moment that you say it, if you're talking to people in business or you're talking to people in finance, they immediately shut off. So I found instead that a far more useful thing to talk about is financial extraction. And it changes the conversation when actually I think in essence we're talking about the same thing because I mean financial extraction is the root cause of the growth imperative, right? Of the necessity for never-ending growth because there's so much extraction from our economy. We need to continue growing just to maintain a steady state. But at the same time, it's a different way of saying it. And particularly when you do start invoking scripture, because there's plenty of places also in scripture where, it's really supportive of a lot of the same kinds of concepts. And I got into contact with the economy of Francesco. Also, in the course of my travels, I was in Croatia giving a talk at the University of Split, and that's where I met someone there from the economy of Francesco. And it turns out that actually a lot of that material really resonates. And
mm.
they invited me back to teach at a 1 week Catholic summer school, also in Croatia, and really, a lot of the sort of PGE materials resonated. I have to try to use the words post growth a bit less
Mm.
because those words don't necessarily resonate with that particular crowd. But the actual concepts definitely did. And I stayed also for the rest of the week of the summer school. I also learned just as much from them, probably more, than what they learned from me. And, they also had quite some sessions that were also talking about Catholic social teaching and really all the great stuff that is in there. There was also, also a session with a lot of quotes, from scripture in support of well-being economy and, and bits that they'd extracted from the encyclicals of the various popes. And I'm not just talking about Francis, but also John Paul II and Pope Leo. And and really, there's stuff in there about how, capital should flow and not accumulate. Like, I'm not joking. So, it's really good stuff. But I think that we need to learn how to translate a lot of our concepts from woke into Christian. And I can imagine that not everybody on the left is willing to do this.
Mm.
Because I know that religion is extremely distasteful for a number of people. I also realize that a lot of people collectively have traumas, because of how at times they might have been treated by people who were religious. But I also urge people to understand that there's traumas on both sides, right? Because I
Mm.
think there's also traumas and plenty of Christians who've been belittled and, and basically been verbally attacked by progressives. That trauma basically moves both ways. And I think both sides, in a sense, are longing for recognition and are longing for empathy, and to not constantly be held up as the bad guy.
Mm.
So, yeah, so I think in that sense, there's a lot of partnerships that we can have, I think, between progressives and Christians if we are willing to let go a bit of our identity politics.
Mm.
And I think that's a really tough ask for everybody. But I think particularly right now for those of us on the left. And such a moment after the US election results, I know there's quite a number of people who are like, we just need to double down. We just need to be even angrier. We just need to, to protest even more. And we just need to try harder. But look, guys, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and then expecting a different outcome. So, we need to try different things. And I think that it really starts with working on overcoming the polarization.
Mm.
I really think it starts with finding common ground with people who are different than us because they are not bad people. My parents voted for Trump. And, for me, I feel like I've had a success if I can have a conversation with them where nobody's buttons were pushed, right? If we can actually have a conversation where I can listen to them and the valid points and concerns that they make, and they can maybe even listen to me a little bit, and also acknowledge some of those points that we might even share in common, because it actually turns out that they do care about things, and a lot of the things they care about are legitimate. So, for me, I feel like also on the left, with these elections, we need to have a moment of reckoning.
Mm.
And we need to investigate, every time the right says woke, we roll our eyes. But at the same time, I think we need to ask how much truth is there in what they're saying, right? How much is there about cancel culture that might be toxic and violent? How much is there, in our wanting to tear things down that maybe is not leading to a constructive approach that might be actually losing us goodwill amongst people? How much are we clinging to symbolic, how do I say it? Just virtue signaling. Yes, we do care, about, I don't know, GLBTQ people, but how acceptable is it that we're forcing other people to use their pronouns when they don't want to? And kind of imposing our culture on this. And look, I know that saying this stuff is almost enough to get me canceled.
Yeah.
And I need to be careful about this too, because look, don't get me wrong. I'm also completely pro GLBTQ. I'm an ally for sure. And I'm perfectly happy to respect others' pronouns and to use my own when I'm being asked. But at the same time, I also acknowledge that there are some people who I think this just goes too far. And, also I think that with the censorship also that has been happening with things like social media, we saw it during the pandemic. I mean, of course, it's nice to vaccinate, for the sake of other people, particularly for those for weak immune systems. But at the same time, any kind of alternate discussion was suppressed, by the mainstream media. It was literally censored on social network platforms. It was only the extreme right that had the guts to tell that alternate story. And I'm sorry, but like we need to be telling alternate stories also about things like vaccines when, first of all, they've been insufficiently tested. And second of all, the pharma companies are making record profits. But even the most extreme left parties shied away from this. And we all just lined up, behind the mainstream narrative and we're afraid to ask questions. And I think this is kind of like the part of the problem that needs to change. I think that in some ways the left has been so extreme in its approach, it's wind up pushing people away.
Mm.
And when you push away people who are in the center left, guess where they go? They move over to the center right, and then they start voting for these other right wing parties. And then we start wondering why we're losing elections. And this, I think, is the grand challenge that is really facing us on the left, that we need to start rebuilding the center left. And the way that we're going to rebuild the center left is by being different than the extreme left. We can't continue with a lot of this wokeness, with a lot of this cancel culture. I mean, and the real question I think that we find before us is how can we be progressive without being woke? What pieces of it can we keep, and what pieces of it do we maybe need to let go of? And also what bits of what they're saying on the right make sense? And what bits of those can we maybe also support, and can we also line up behind? Right? But the problem is, this is an extremely scary place for people to be, because at this point you're going to start drawing the ire of both sides. Because the right is going to, the far right is going to hate you, because you're still progressive. But the far left is probably also going to cancel you because you're not completely 100%, lining up along exactly all of the same lines that we're supposed to be saying. So it's really a position where I think we need brave people
Mm.
who are progressive, but who are willing to try and build bridges with the other side. We need to recreate this. We need to somehow create a center left for these politically homeless people that have either moved over to extreme left or who have completely moved over to the right. And I think more of them have moved over to the right. And I think somehow we need to be able to win these people back, because if we don't, I think we are going to continue losing in elections, after election, after election, after election, as we have been. And this is a bitter pill for people to swallow on the
Mm.
left.
Mm.
People don't want to hear this, but I think that if we actually want to start making a shift, I think we have no choice. We need to start listening we need to actually start really having empathy for those people who are different. And I think we need to start actually using some of our tools like nonviolent communication, to be able to reach out to those people who are different from us. I think it's never been so urgent.
I have been, first of all, let's put that first. I admire how you have gotten a broader perspective on this topic in the past years, and how much you've learned from your roadshow and meeting these people and having these conversations. So that's really interesting, and it's also telling. Couple of things that I see as a connection here. I think the book by Catherine Hayhoe, who is a professor in climate, Saving Us, talks about like similar ideas on this, right? So she talks about how you could help bringing your story to different groups of people if you connect with their values, if you connect with their points of view, and then show them how that is related to climate. instead of saying just climate is bad and it's just getting worse and it's just the temperatures is rising and we should do something about it. It's just, so what are your values? And she talks about how she's doing this in these conversations and talks. And it's really interesting to read how she's making that connection. And I can see it because now she's on Blue Sky too. I can see she's doing the same thing. She's also collecting all these climate professors and people who are in climate change to give them a place where they can find each other, but also to give other people, to find data and stuff, still what's going on. And at the same time, she's making these connections. And she has a very Christian background too. So that's very relational to what you're telling me. The other thing is I just followed a training in the Netherlands, which is in the UK, started, which is called Carbon Conversations. In the Netherlands, it's called Klimaatgesprekken. There, the same thing is true, right? It's all about conversations, all about starting and planting seeds in people's minds instead of just convincing them with like a lot of data saying that what we do now is wrong, right? So giving them the opportunity to make small steps, ask questions, learn, but having conversations with each other on how, what could they do, what could they change in their own lives without, blaming them for taking another flight to their vacation, right? And the other book I was reading just recently that we covered in our podcast is by Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. I think it's the Lessons of Life or something. I'm not sure what the English title is. But it is also, again, there, because you talk about violent communication or nonviolent communication. And to me, that book also gives the great inspiration for me to look at a life at a nonviolent way, because how he describes how nonviolent his ideas were, and that's not just about just a strike where you don't use violence, but it's also looking at, like, for example, how we waste time as a violence to other people, to resources, also how we consume as a violence to people around us or people in other parts of the world. And to me, it's looking at from a non-violent way and also practicing practicing nonviolence in your life. I think that's what I'm looking at, right? So to find ways how you can connect with other people and have this conversation to understand where they are, exactly what you described. So to find, instead of looking for the differences, find for where we connect, where we think similarly, where we think the same even. And yes, and Christianity or Islamic ideas, it's all very similar. We tend to look at the differences, but it's all very similar. It's very closely related. And yes, you may look at, okay, if you look at Islamic, you see the headscarf and you see that as a difficulty or problem or whatever, but that's not the point. Look at how equal or how similar our beliefs are, how our values are. It's a lot easier. It makes life a lot easier to look at the similarities instead of looking at these differences. So to me, it sounds very logical, and but like you said, it takes a lot of courage for the people to make this move, because you probably be hated by a lot of people where you feel very comfortable before because you were part of this group and you felt comfortable, and now you're like going in a different direction and you belong, like at the moment, to almost nobody. So that's a very uncomfortable feeling. So it takes a lot of courage to do this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, people who are doing this, I think, for right now, are basically politically homeless. And I think the real
Yeah.
question is, how can you create a soft home, a soft landing pad for these people?
Yeah, so what I've been doing, like you mentioned before, with the inner development goals, to me, that's a part of this, right? So to develop your own skills to make this possible, to make the change within yourself, to make the connection with other people, to be in a community, to have the courage to have your own inner compass, and all these skills that are in there, they are all there to, to look at a way how you can contribute to a different future, to a better world that we want to create together. And it has to do again with making that connection with people. Right now you may think they're like idiots or stupid or not wise or whatever you may think of them, in a different way, so that you make the connection and find, oh, we have a lot of in common, we do think on a lot of topics similarly, so how can we use this in think of new rules and new politics ideas and whatever is necessary to make this change.
Yeah. And I think one of the big problems also is just like also on the left, we like to talk a lot about colonialism and, decolonialism, of course, as well, and sort of who is the colonizer and who is the colonized. And, generally, of course, the colonized are the people from developing countries and the global south and whatnot. But what we're ignoring with all of this is the fact that pretty much everybody has been colonized by the economic system.
Mhm.
And we put it in this place where white men are colonizers, completely failing to acknowledge that a whole lot of these white men actually are, I mean, they're economically disadvantaged oftentimes. I mean, if you think about sort of like, the poor white men in rural Appalachia, I mean, they're just as colonized as anyone from the global south. I mean, really by the economic system. So this is something that I think also the progressive left completely fails to acknowledge. And of course, you have pundits, on the center left who are offering a home for these disenfranchised white men. I mean, it could be Joe Rogan, it could be Jordan Peterson, that are basically giving their own soft landing pad, for these men. But I mean, we need to give people a place of dignity. Where we can put them, where, with us, they can still be okay. And we can also acknowledge their own struggles.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, I think many of them are also suffering from the same, housing unaffordability crisis and the same inflation and the same, a lot of the same pressures that also those who we tend to support with DEI are also struggling with. And I think also in order to be able to win back some of the people that we lost, I think we need to also get a little bit more nuanced, because even the colonizers maybe have been colonized themselves, and nothing is so black and white.
I have to say that you have I'm not sure. It sounds to me, I think that's better. I have to use my words carefully. It sounds to me that you have made a shift in this in the last 4 years, when you were so focused on post growth and extraction of profit, um, and now how you look at it now is looking for ways to um, for more people to connect with the ideas, to um, use the same idea but in different communities, different um, parts of the world, even, but still communities, I would say again. So that's really interesting for me in this conversation. What I've learned so far is the yeah the opening that you've created here, and ideas. So I'm now thinking about how you just said how you did a tour this year for post-growth entrepreneurship on all these different locations, and next year you want to have like a little bit less of a year of um, more time for yourself. Let's put it that way. I can see when you're gonna push this even more. It's gonna like absorb you even more than before because of the necessity, the need there is right now for this voice, for this story. and we need stories for people to connect with. So I can see how this could make it even more intense for you.
Yes, but at the same time, I don't think that I am necessarily always the right person to be doing that translation because I can only really speak from the place that I come from. And I think that one of the things I've also learned on the during the PGE Roadshow is also that we need people to translate things into their own geographical, political, cultural context. I mean, I can give you an example. When I was in Indonesia, I was very fortunate to be hosted by Hera Hayadanti, who is she works with the Post Growth Institute, and she is absolutely wonderful. And she is also super, super Muslim. And she hosted me and really set up a whole bunch of different events, including one which was very, very wonderful. It was at a Islamic high school slash agricultural cooperative. And we had set up a session for these high schoolers. They were basically students who had flown in from some of the neighboring Indonesian islands, and they were learning how to set up their own agricultural co-ops in such a way that the co-ops provided the money to run the Islamic school. And they were actually learning how to do this in outside of Bandung in Indonesia, and then they would basically go back to where they came from so they could replicate the idea. Really, really beautiful. So I was giving this guest lecture to these high schoolers about PGE, and I was telling my stories. And Hera, not only was she translating those stories from English into Indonesian, but she was also inserting the Quran verses at the correct place that went along with the stories. I mean, amazing. And it really resonated with the students. And that's something that I never would have been able to do. But it really required someone who was from that context to be able to make that translation layer. Yeah, and that's something that is completely outside of me. But similarly, I also went to another Muslim country, Turkey. I went to go visit Istanbul. And I was at the International Prosumer Economy Conference. And we also had a panel on rethinking finance. And prior to the panel starting, I spoke with a few of the panelists, and they were like, is there anything that we should discuss as being potential solutions on this panel? And I said, well, what about Islamic banking and Sharia finance? I mean, shouldn't this be like a great solution? And then they looked at me and they were like, not going there. And I was like, what? Why not? And then then they looked at me again and they were like, Melanie, Islam killed our democracy. And I was like, whoa, like I wasn't expecting this. But, I'd forgotten, about their local context. And some of these people had traumas with the recent turn of political events there. And apparently this was a non-topic. And here I come, white Westerner, with all my good ideas, thinking, oh, okay. And just because it works in Bandung, Indonesia, and is really warmly received, doesn't necessarily mean it's equally warmly received among some of the people living in Istanbul. And this is sort of what I realized that actually, sort of in the end, I mean, I barely know anything. So, I can come and speak about the principles of financial non-extraction and to try and get people to really understand what is financially non-extractive business and finance. But at that point, they need to take it and run with it themselves because that additional translation step, I'm not going to be able to do. So, I mean, I also had the great pleasure and privilege also to visit Japan and also learned about how post-growth could also be a concept that could really resonate in a place like Japan. I mean, in part because their economy hasn't grown for quite a while. So, I mean, they need to learn how to thrive in situations where there's no economic growth, whether they like it or not. But even beyond that, because, I mean, the whole culture in Japan, they place a really large importance on collective well-being. And they're still the kinds of people where you can get a job for life and where the company actually feels an obligation to take care of you. And first thing in the morning, they're all outdoors doing their calisthenics together. I mean, can you imagine something like that here in Western Europe? So, and on top of that, just other little aspects of their culture. I mean, with the Zen Buddhism, with they've also got some other concepts but you really need people that are local to be able to make that translation again, because I don't know very much about Japan, and I'm just not the right person to do it. So also, I mean, you're saying that it's going to become more intense, but I think at the same time, I also realize I need to let go
Mm.
because the tighter I hold it, and clutch it to my chest, the less other people will be able to take it and run with it and make their own steps with it. And I think that's also indeed the irony. I need to provide people with the tools that they can basically do things completely separately from me. That is really, I think, the missing step with PGE right now. So I think the real challenge and the real thing that I have is just really trying to figure out, how do I get myself out of the middle of it? And how do I actually make it less intense for myself? Because the past year with this PGE Roadshow, I feel like I've been planting seeds. But next year, if I'm going to spend more time staying home, then the next question is, how can I cultivate these seeds so they can grow on their own?
Well, that is a wonderful challenge, Melanie. I like it a lot, and I agree. I think that if you really want to make sure that whatever idea you have that is going to grow larger than you need to teach others. You need to let go of your position. You need to let go of that you are the front woman, man, person. So, because it is always nice to be asked for like a presentation to do something to because you are the carrier of the ideas and they see you in videos and everything else. Um, but there's a lot of other people out there who know about this topic too, right? They may know like 90% of what you know right now on this topic, but they have other ideas, local ideas that they can inject and um, enrich your ideas, right? So, like you just mentioned, what happened in Indonesia. So, I think to me, what this conversation is bringing me, and hopefully also for the people who are listening, is giving ideas. If you are growing an initiative, if you're building an initiative, thinking about how you can make it go bigger without you is an important part of the work that you need to do as like the founder or the originator of the idea. And I think that you are doing a great job on that. So thank you for that.
Well, working on it, but I mean, it's going to be a long road, I think, to really completely de-extricate myself from a lot of this stuff. But it'll be a process, but it's certainly a worthy direction. But at the end of the day, I mean, I also think that we also need to not be precious also about ownership of things also. And precisely the same way that post-growth and degrowth got politicized, I'm absolutely terrified that financial non-extraction will also at a certain point be stamped woke because it's a very easy thing, I think, for people to stamp woke. um, and what I'm really hoping is that, if I can have contact with those communities of people who are completely different than me, I mean, whether we're talking about people of faith, with the Economy Francesco, for example, but also other places, perhaps, hopefully also on the Protestant side as well. um, I hope that they can claim it as their own because the whole financial non-extraction thing very much is uh, Christian among
Mm.
very many other religions. But I think also at the end of the day, if they can claim it and if it can be theirs, it won't be shot down for being woke. And I think this might be one of the few ways that we might be able to get political consensus because the progressives are going to support this stuff no matter what. I mean, because it's in line with our values. But right now, I mean, if stuff is presented as post-growth or degrowth, the conservative right shuts it down. But if, and I was actually speaking with one particular Dominican nun about this topic, and we were talking, and I was saying, I've got a lot of really great contacts, within the European Greens and the European Socialists and Progressives, but the one group who would never listen to me is the EPP, the Christian Party of Ursula von der Leyen, and she said yes, but they'll listen to me, and that's what we need.
Right.
And people like that are willing to partner with us if we are respectful
Yes.
and if we are nice to them. And that will actually finally, I think, be able to give us the political consensus that we need to actually make this change happen on a true and meaningful level. And I think also, if we can start to fix the economy, then I think people will also have fewer reasons to be angry.
Mm.
And that could also be the start, perhaps, of curing some of this political polarization and division as well.
Um, I've asked just a couple of questions, and you just give us great ideas and thoughts of what you've experienced during the tour, but also during the past couple of years. Is there anything that you still want to add that I didn't ask?
I think just that our future in moving forward, I mean, really does depend upon translators and bridge builders. And I sort of hope that those who listen to this can experience this really as a call to action, to learn how to find common ground, to learn how to find shared language, to learn how to translate from one set of concepts into another. It just so happens that, for example, the concept of sociocracy and holacracy that is quite popular on the progressive left matches almost one-to-one with the Catholic principle of subsidiarity. We like to talk about mission and purpose on the left, and a lot of them also talk about ministry, on the right. We like to talk about values on the left. They like to talk about virtues on the right. Slightly different ways of saying it, but we're actually talking about the same thing.
Uh, you've given me um, new energy, new ideas on these topics of I would say the kind of the things that I've been experiencing lately, and having like these thoughts, and you like made the connection for me. So it's really interesting to me, and hopefully also to you as a listener, how this could help us for the next steps if you want to come out of this far right movement that we are seeing today, instead of just um, adding more energy to fights that really don't change anything, is shifting the energy to having more conversations to make the connection. And to me, that is an important topic that I think, yeah, I could even improve and build more of. So thank you for that, Melanie. Thank you for giving me these ideas.
Thank you for inviting me.